Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, and we look at life through a biblical lens. Tonight, we're going to take a look at some of the events that are starting to move us toward what the Bible refers to as the Great Tribulation. There are things that have to take place before this can happen, or while it's happening, or help it unfold. I guess, technically, what you need to know from a biblical standpoint is that there isn't anything in the Bible that God tells us has to happen before the church of Jesus Christ, the bride of Christ, is removed from this planet. The believers in Thessalonica were upset, and Peter was writing to them in his general epistles to help them and to calm their hearts, because they knew that Jesus had promised to return for them. And some of these believers were dying, and it upset them that maybe these people would miss out on all of the benefits when Jesus comes, because he was late in coming. And Peter said it's not like that. And so there is this doctrine. It is not listed in the Bible in sentence structure. This happens, then this happens, then this happens. But there is a very, very strong case to be made for the fact that no member of the Church of Jesus Christ is here when the Great Tribulation begins. The Great Tribulation is a time in the history of God, in the program of God, where God is pouring out his wrath on men, on the people on this earth. And the earth suffers terribly through this 7-year period. There's no indication in the Bible that God would do that to his church. In fact, the promise is that we have been preserved, kept from the wrath to come. Anyway, there are pawns on the board that are being moved around. Things are taking place politically and economically and every other way, religiously, that set the world up for the events that are listed in the Great Tribulation, in the book of Revelation and Daniel and so forth. We are taking a look at those things as they start to come together. And there's a host of them. There's a lot of stuff that's already happened to put it together to give us every indication that it's getting closer. According to several sources recently, the Times of London is reporting that the European Union has put together a plan to build a unified military which could potentially bypass individual governments, the individual governments of nation states in that European Union. And there are other things that kind of are attached to that idea. On May 27th of this year, 2016, the Telegraph, that's a British publication, reported Brussels officials, and Brussels is where the European Union's headquarters are. Their parliament is in Germany, but the headquarters is in Brussels. They got a big beast out front of their building, and there's a woman riding on that beast. She is Europa. But it's interesting that they would choose that motif. Anyway, the Telegraph's reporting that Brussels officials were trying to keep plans for this European Union army hidden until after June 23rd. That's when Great Britain is voting as to whether they would stay in the EU or they would get out. A diplomat took notes from the proposal, and that's what was leaked to the press. The plans, according to this May 27th article that I got off of Breitbart.com, include mechanisms set out in the 2009 Lisbon Treaty about a centralized headquarters and, quote, permanent structured defense cooperation, end of quote. It says our external action must become more joined up across policy areas, institutions, and member states. If this materializes, a December 2015 article claims, the Army would possess, quote, the ability to take control of national borders without the consent of the government of the nation in question. In theory, this would mean the European Union Army members could seize border controls, or lack thereof, from countries like the UK without the permission of that country's leaders or its elected representatives. Funding that particular force would cost in the neighborhood of 300 million euros. Now, this is something that this man of sin the Bible talks about in the book of Revelation, and later on the Antichrist, will absolutely need if he is to gather and get control of Europe and whatever else he needs in order to accomplish his task. He will be working very hard to keep the peace during this time period. You have either read the passage in the Bible, or you've read books, or you've heard sermons, or you've watched movies, and the people talk constantly about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, these different colored horses that come on the scene in rapid succession, four of them. These are representative of this man of sin, which is really a globally appointed, the Bible says king, but it's kind of a leader of one sort or another, probably of the European Union, the United Nations or something of that nature. Anyway, he's moving in to take control of the Middle East and of Europe and maybe even the United States, to get control of the finances and all of the commerce and stop the war and put down all of the nonsense that's just interfering with business. And he comes in as a military leader. He comes in on this white horse, a savior. He's a false Christ. He has 10 other, they're called kings, but 10 other leaders around the world who are working with him. They answer to him. And immediately you see an increase in war and the devastation that war brings, which has to do with disease and death. There is also the corruption of water supplies and other things like that, and tremendous numbers of people die. This chaos would be much easier to control if there were a military force that could take control of individual nations without having to ask permission. On the same line, the European Commission plans to attack citizens' right to online privacy, insisting that state-issued ID cards should be used if you want to log into platforms like YouTube and Facebook and even Uber. The vice president of the Digital Single Market on European Commission, former communist Andrus Ansip, is behind the next European Union's raid on personal freedoms, promoting the idea of using national ID cards to log in to online services. Leaked documents from within the European Commission reveal a call for the rollout of a more extensive use of national ID cards all across the European Union. The documents have since been uploaded to the Commission's own website. Mr. Ansip is from Estonia. a small Baltic country and former communist state which has the most highly developed national ID card system in the world. Now, the Estonian state website says, quote, much more than simply a legal picture ID, the mandatory national card serves as the digital access card for all of Estonia's secure e-services. Can you say 666? There's a lot of speculation as to what that is all about, but there's no doubt that it's a code. It's a numeric code, a computerized system that will be in place. My theory is that the three digits represent what the man of sin is going to be able to tack on the back end of whatever this standardized card is, or perhaps all standardized cards, whether they be credit cards or access cards or what driver's license or whatever they may be, that without which they would not be legal across the board. It could be that simple. And the Bible talks about it being on the forehead, the back of the hand, and we've talked, and you can go online and check it out. But they're telling us that is the most effective way to do it. Under the skin. Got to cut somebody's hand off to get it. They want to get money out of our pockets. Money is a big cause of crime. And it's just not neat. They've gotten most of the cash out of the system. Our banks don't have more than about a tenth of the money that's in circulation. We're just operating on credits anyway. In the midst of all of this, we have this indication, this warning from one of our admirals that the Russians are playing around in the Atlantic Ocean. He says, once again, an effective, skilled, and technologically advanced Russian submarine force is challenging us. Russian submarines are prowling the Atlantic, testing our defenses, confronting our command of the seas, and preparing the complex underwater battle space to give them the edge in any future conflict. Not only have Russia's actions and capabilities increased in alarming and confrontational ways, its national security policy is aimed at challenging the United States and its NATO allies and partners. This admiral, I think he's an admiral, his name is Foggo, F-O-G-G-O. I don't know what his title is. But he says not only have the Russia's actions and capabilities increased, but their national security policy is aimed at challenging the United States. And since the Russian seizure of the Crimea in 2014, Russian naval force surface ships, aircraft, and submarines have been much more active in presence and in operations, particularly the submarines. This was in a report in a publication called the U.S. Naval Institute News, the online edition, June 1st of this year, 2016. Things are moving together. Things are coming together, coalescing. Little piece here, little piece there. But it's unmistakable that the world is getting smaller. It's getting much more dangerous. And it's getting increasingly difficult to control the money, which is another way of saying control the people. We're moving in the direction the Bible predicted over 2,000 years ago.